in spades is developing an ERP system in a matter of months that had taken others decades to develop. So Jay,
Well, John,
Thank
kind
you
of
for
you.
having
It was
me.
no, thank you for being here. It was incredible. I wish we had overlapped a lot more at
Yes,
Tesla, but of course, we know what kind of collectively we did. Thanks a lot. John, you may know, brings a lot, right? I'll probably reverse the order of some of the questions that we're going to discuss here. First is, you have sat on the boards, you've been entrepreneur yourself, you've started companies, been very successful, and you've been an operational leader, right? As a CEO for large companies, you've taken companies public as well. So one thing about, from your perspective, how do leaders need to think about change? And you just talked about a big change, but that would come. What should leaders think about change?
I think the biggest maybe hurdle to change is requirements. In every company, as they get a little bit older and a little bit bigger, it adds more and more requirements for people. And we used to think about that like a garden that doesn't get weeded. These requirements pile up, and nobody ever goes in to weed the gardens to pull out the dumb requirements. And if you do, you build advantage. And so I think, a lot of people come in and say, hey, this is the way. I think a lot about customer journeys, and what I would want as a consumer, and what really high expectation consumers would want in a customer journey. And I look at some of the customer journeys that people go through in the automotive space, and I'm like, why do we do this to people? This isn't the process we designed for ourselves. So the way to pull yourself out of that morass is to start with a blank sheet of paper and say, if I landed from Mars and I was going to bring somebody through a service process, what would it look like? If I was going to bring somebody through a sale process, what would it look like? Oftentimes in that blank sheet of paper, it will reveal the essence of what you're trying to deliver, and you step out of this goofiness that's in the current process that was sort of developed over decades. And now it seems like cement that everybody has to follow. But that blank sheet of paper shows you, oh, there could be a new way here. And if there's a new way, and I get to that new way ahead of my competition, people are going to buy my product.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that I want to relate to. I'm sure many of our dealers here can relate to as well. So we work with a lot of them in early days. Not all, but many times. They run through these challenges with their staff because some of these legacy systems have been there for decades, and they themselves don't know why a process would take probably 20 steps because they designed the process around the old systems. Like to your point, if you don't go and look back, why are we doing these 20 steps? It's like, John, you know this well, I'm preaching to the choir here, right? So if a simple thing you will all relate to is, when you are going to Home Depot or Lowe's to buy a drill, what do we really need, right? I know it's a simple, obvious, trick question, right? What do we really need? You don't really need a drill. You need a way to make a hole somewhere, right? But if there is a better way to make that hole, why do you need a drill? So I think that kind of opens up the mind. How do you think about the end goal or the outcome to start from the scratch, the blank sheet of paper that John was talking about?
Yes.
Really.
Yeah. So in the purchase process, I know if I'm going to sell somebody a vehicle, obviously I want their service business over time. To get that service business over time, they need to trust me. That trust is developed in the sales process. So why would I run somebody through a sales process that creates distrust? And you know what I'm talking about. Why run them through an F&I process that is so demeaning to a customer's brain that they distrust you? That's destroying where the cash flow is eventually. And so we would start with a blank sheet of paper and say, how do we develop trust through this process so that we get to the real goal, which is the service cash flow over the lifetime of that car? And we're running people for the $1,500 we'll make on the new car sale. We're running people through a bunch of hurdles that make them not trust us. And so that's how we would think about that.
Trust something, yeah, exactly. And trust and transparency. Consumers, clearly won't about that, talk about that quite a bit. That's
They do.
what they look for, right? Trust and transparency in the process. And we have a few dealers who have done that amazingly well in terms of how to create trust and
Totally.
transparency using technology and the platform.
Exactly, and they differentiate, and you can see
Big difference, absolutely.
success in the market's
Oh
totally
yeah,
different.
yeah. Next question, John. Again, congrats on the book, fantastic, and thank you for giving me the privilege, preview copy before you launch them.
Fun.
And by the way, John is going to sign his book immediately after this. And please, I know there are a few who have read, and I've heard from some dealers who are fans of the book itself, like the concepts what John talked about, some of the things he spoke on the stage itself, right? So he's going to sign the book. Just keep in mind, immediately after the session, you can go up and get the signed book from him. In the algorithms, you talk about the 5 steps, right? So in that 5 steps, what do you think, obviously, especially connecting to dealer business, what do you think, obviously, they may skip, and what would it cost them if they skip that step?
Well, I do think it's like the first 2 steps are maybe the most important. It is like getting rid of all the dumb requirements, and then the second is deleting every step in a process that the customer doesn't pay you for. So here's what I mean by that. This will sound crazy, but I created a chain of national collision centers, and today it's about a $4 billion in revenue chain. And one of the questions we asked ourselves is like, hey, the customer doesn't pay us for a parts PO. Like when we go order parts for that repair, and we send that out to the parts network and parts come back, customer doesn't pay us for a PO. Customer doesn't pay us for an estimate. And that led to this breakthrough that I think you guys are working on, if not already in market with. We asked ourselves, like, why do we write a service estimate? We already know the symptoms of the car. We already know the make and model, and we have repaired this car 5,000 times. So why are we acting like we've never seen this car and this repaired before? We've got 5,000 ROs. Why don't we start with those ROs? Here's the labor hours, here's the parts that are likely on that car.
Yes, that's
And
our
you
service
start
AI
not
and
with a
technician
blank
AI.
sheet of paper, you start with a preconditioned thing, so that means I don't have to have the customer come in anymore to diagnose. And if I don't have to have them come in anymore, then I can do mobile service for them. And so this, like, getting rid of like steps that the customer doesn't pay you for and starting to question, like, how would we do this if we couldn't do a repair estimate? How would we do this? Now, of course, you've got to have the company or the customer sign that estimate, but it's based off of the data that the 5,000 repairs that we've seen for this particular symptom.
No, again, the thing is that's you may have seen a little bit of preview of our service AI and technician AI. That's what it's going to enable.
I've been waiting for this for like 20 years. It's so cool.
Finally, it's out there, and there is a lot of excitement among our dealers. So we just need to scale it up, roll it out fast enough. And to your point, exactly to the same dealership, same type of make, model car. There's already maybe 5,000, sometimes 500,000 services already done. So why do you have to reinvent the wheel, right?
Exactly.
Like, make it simple, easy, just give the great experience to the consumer.
Totally.
Awesome. So now, outside of that, AI in a dealership, right? From your vantage point, as I mentioned to the audience, you created the network of collision centers. So you're not new to automotive, network itself, the retail network itself.
Yeah.
And then now, of course, did an amazing job scaling Tesla from many aspects, right? And then now you're on the board of General Motors, you ran Lyft, took them through as a public company. Now, from an AI deployment, and then when it comes down to dealers itself, how should they think about AI? So your thoughts be?
I try to simplify AI because there's definitely AI hysteria around where everybody's trying to deploy AI. And so what I'll ask teams is, where is the biggest lever we could pull in our P&L to yield impact? So here's an example of that. So I had this conversation with the CTO of Lululemon. And he's like,
you're on the board of Lululemon as well.
Yeah, so I been an interesting 6 months. So I had this conversation with him. He's like, where do I deploy AI? I said, let's think about the biggest impacts to our P&L that would benefit from AI. In the apparel business, the thing that you don't want is you don't want the teenager to walk into a store at Lululemon looking for a pair of shorts and they're not on the shelf. Same thing on the e-com business. You do not want her shopping and they're not on the shelf. That's called a stock out. And when there's a stock out, you miss 100% of the revenue. And in a business with 60% gross margin, you miss all that gross margin too. And it turns out that that's one of the biggest levers in the P&L is getting rid of stockouts, making sure we have the right stuff on the shelf when somebody wants it. That's an incredibly difficult problem, but it's an optimization problem. And an optimization problem is what AI was designed to do. It's what it does at its core, it optimizes. So the CTO and I walked through and I said, if you're going to deploy AI in one place in this organization, deploy it here. You will have such a huge impact on the P&L, you will never buy yourself dinner again. And so that's a simplification. Rather than saying to that executive leader, once you deploy AI in all these locations, it's like, no. Do it in the place where we're going to have maximum impact and where AI is super well suited for this.
Perfect. I got a CFO on stage today.